Welcome to the Age is Irrelevant podcast with your host, Helen Fritsch. Helen is a 60-plus lifelong competitive athlete, flight attendant, published fitness model, writer, IFBB bodybuilding pro, and certified wine specialist who believes that your age is irrelevant to pursue goals, dreams, and desires. Are you a woman in her 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond who still has a burning desire to pursue a dream or a passion? Are you thinking about starting a new chapter in your life, but you're hesitant, thinking that you might be too old or just don't know where to begin? The Age is Irrelevant podcast is a podcast devoted to women who want to defy the odds, smash barriers, and redefine happiness and success after 40. It's time to make a difference. There is no need to dread blowing out that added birthday candle every year. A new movement is slowly taking momentum, where being over the hill just isn't relevant anymore. Age labels are being thrown out the window, and women are rediscovering the strength within themselves to make a difference, not only within their own lives, but also touching and inspiring the lives of other women. Join Helen as she and her guests discuss all aspects of aging after 40 and how to make the aging process and those twilight years more rewarding, exciting, and fun.
Hello, and welcome to the Age is Irrelevant podcast. I'm your host, Helen Fritsch, and this is episode 118. Now, today's guest is someone who has been at the forefront of optimization and biohacking movement for years. Jay Campbell is a renowned author, thought leader, and one of the most trusted voices in the world of hormones, peptides, and cutting-edge longevity strategies. He's the author of 9 books and has dedicated his career to helping people reclaim their health, their vitality, and performance at every stage of life. Jay is known for breaking down complex science into real, actionable strategies that empower you to take control of your body and, most importantly, your future. What I really love about Jay is his passion for truth, his commitment to living optimally, and the mission to help others do the same, especially in a world where misinformation is really everywhere. We're diving into everything from peptides and biohacking to longevity, performance, HRT, and what it really takes to thrive, not just survive as we age. So get ready, because this is a powerful, eye-opening conversation. And please welcome Jay Campbell.
Hi, Jay. Welcome to the show.
Helen, thank you so much for having me. I'm always humbled and privileged to talk to people in this community about the amazing things that are happening in what I call the golden age of biomedical science. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And so for my listeners, I am talking to one of the leading voices in the world of human optimization and longevity science, Jay Campbell. He's an internationally recognized biohacker, peptide therapy expert, best-selling author of 9 books, which his latest book has just come out, and we'll talk about it during the show, focused on hormone optimization, performance health, and cutting-edge strategies to extend both lifespan and health span. He's been at this for over 2 decades. He's been researching and teaching how we use advanced science like peptides, hormone therapy, and precision lifestyle strategies to help our bodies function at their highest level. And through his books, podcasts, and global educational platforms, Jay has helped thousands of people better understand how to take control of their biology so they can live longer, stronger, leaner, and more energized well into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. So again, Jay, welcome to the show.
Helen, that's an amazing bio. I need to hire you as my PR agent, but thank you. You're more than welcome to have. I'm more than excited to be here today.
Awesome. So I always like to ask my guests, how we got into this area. So tell me how you got into peptides.
So really good question. And I'll make a very long story, very short, like 100,000 foot summary. At 29, I got kicked in the testicles playing in a men's basketball league in Southern California. I checked out, keeled over, obviously in pain. And within like 8 weeks, I started feeling run down, really broken down. So at the time, I worked for the Los Angeles Times as an advertising sales rep. I was about a month away from turning 30. And I went to my PPO doctor through my insurance. And of course, I don't think there's any coincidences. Any coincidences in the world, only synchronicities. He recommended me to a Harvard-educated endocrinologist named Dr. Raymond Scruggs. And he took my labs and he saw that I had the blood testosterone levels of, an 85-year-old plus man, slash, as he called it, geriatric. And he said, look, I could put you on therapeutic testosterone and I'll have you right as rain within 8 weeks, but go home, talk to your fiance, get her approval, both of your approval, and let's do it. So obviously I went home, we spoke. I didn't have children at the time. There was very, very minimized risk. Obviously, we're both smart people, consenting adults. And so I did it. And as he said, 8 weeks later, I started feeling amazing. And so when I went back to see him on the checkup, he wanted to take me off. And I was like, dude, you're not taking me off of therapeutic testosterone. This is like life altering, transformative. So at that point, this is in 1999. There's not a lot of information found online. There are very few books. There was a lot of Russian and Bulgarian research because they had been using testosterone in their athletes for decades, but there was no AI to translate it. So it was very difficult to get information. So at that point, I became this very meticulous guinea pig, lab rat, experimenting on myself guy, working with various doctors, different delivery systems, et cetera, with therapeutic hormones. And by 2003, I also started using therapeutic peptides. Now, again, at that point, to get peptides, you had to go through very gray market, research peptide manufacturers. In fact, actually, I say this a lot. The very first company that was selling peptides was a company called Southern Research Company, and they were literally just selling them out the back door of a compound pharmacy in Texas. So if you were connected, in the underground, that's how you got them. But to fast forward, and again, to make a very long story short, I published my first book in 2015. It was written in 2014. It was on therapeutic testosterone. It was called The Definitive TRT Manual. It blew up on Amazon in 2016. It was like number one in men's health for about 5 or 6 months. A lot of people saw it. And, a lot, I say this story in passing and it's kind of funny, but it probably is true. A lot of people believe that Jeff Bezos read that book to go from the pipsqueak, CEO of Amazon to the guy with the shirt off and, the big broad chested dude walking on yachts. In 2016, because again, the book was so well known. And then subsequently from that year to now, as you said, I've written 8 other books. 6 of them are international bestsellers. I lecture around the world. I lecture at medical conferences. And, I've become somewhat of a social media influencer talking about peptides and stuff because I've been using peptides for 23 years and therapeutic hormones for 26. And now I'm obviously blessed and humbled to be able to be on shows such as yourself to talk about these things, in a way that people can understand. I think that's probably my primary gift, is taking very esoteric, very arcane, scientific, medical grade, like terminologies and jargon, and making them relatable to average people. And that's what I've been able to do, not only in my books and stuff like that, but also in speaking. And so I think that's my best gift. And here I am here today to talk to you.
Well, it is your best gift. I'm a huge fan. I have some of your books. When I got interested in peptides, you were the first person I went to on Amazon.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
so let's just start off too. What exactly are peptides in simple terms, and why are they especially relevant as we age?
Great question. So really peptides are what I call organic signaling molecules, or, if you understand what amino acids is, which are chains of proteins. They're either long or short chains of amino acids. So they're all naturally found in human tissue, within signaling or called just biological system function. In fact, like BPC 157, which is a very well-known healing peptide, it stands for body protective compound. It actually is made in human digestive juice. So obviously when it's synthesized in a laboratory setting to be used for people, both injected or actually also orally, and then there's now intranasal formats of it. People can use it and it still will. What I say, all the time is that it will address the underlying, essentially, root cause of whatever the illness, affliction, aka disease or dysregulation is. And so, because they're bioorganic signaling molecules, they don't cause symptoms or side effects in the human body like petroleum distillate, call them Rockefeller, or, allopathic sick care medicines, which all do cause side effects when they're broken down in the body because they're made up of oil or petroleum distillate, essentially.
Right. Wow. So this podcast mainly is for women over 50. And so at what point in midlife should women start paying attention to peptides, if at all?
So it's a really good question. I like to even go back further to unpack this. Like all women and men who are at 40. And I would even argue now, because the environment is so contaminated, we are under such a siege. I call it a full spectrum assault from the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat, that you really should start looking and paying attention to your hormones at probably 35. If you're a woman and you're somewhere between 32 and 40 and you've had a couple of children, you have to become aware of this, because again, thyroid becomes dysfunctional, destabilized. If you carry a child to term twice and you're now in your early to mid 30s, the likelihood that you have thyroid disturbance or thyroid dysregulation is probably 90%. And again, this is not unfortunately taught in medical school. Most doctors do not understand this. They put women on high doses of T3 or T4, which is cytomel or Synthroid, and then they destroy their natural thyroid production. And now these women are addicted to these, high dose thyroid medications for the rest of their life. And as you know, if they stop taking them, which many do because they cause their hair to fall out, they cause all sorts of other symptoms and side effects, they balloon. Right? They gain a bunch of weight and then they can't get the weight off because, again, remember, your thyroid is your master temperature gland or hormone regulation gland. And if it's not functioning adequately, you cannot be lean, you cannot be fit, you cannot be sexy, you cannot feel vivacious as you're getting older. So, you start putting on weight and you feel shitty because it also is, has a lot to do with the brain. So again, thyroid is very, very important. So I think to answer your question, the first thing is, as a woman who is aging, in their mid 30s and up, we have to understand if we're functioning with a deficiency, both from a progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone level, and then of course, thyroid, and they're all interrelated. You cannot optimize a woman or a man's hormones and not also optimize their thyroid gland, because like I said, they're kind of like all interrelated. In fact, I like to say that you're looking at the holy triune, or the three-legged stool. You've got therapeutic hormones, you've got insulin signaling, and then you've got the thyroid. And if you're not optimizing all three of those levels, you're going to end up like over optimizing two or one of the three. And eventually that third leg will break down and it will cause the rest of them to malfunction too. So I think that's the most important thing. Once you're doing that, now you can start looking at peptides. Because peptides are truly the metabolic accelerant, the cognitive accelerant, call it the, how would I say it? My brain is melting right now. What is the master gland? My brain is completely melting right now, but to optimize mitochondria.
Oh, okay.
So we want to look at, like, basically, as we get older, as we're hormonally optimized or working to get hormonally optimized, we want to look at like improving muscle, improving fat loss, insulin sensitivity, avoiding metabolic dysregulation and inflammation. And we can do that again through these quote unquote GH agonist peptides, these mitochondrial optimizing peptides. And then you've obviously got the ones that we talked about, the healing peptides. You've also got anti-aging or longevity peptides. And then for sure you have cognitive restoring peptides. So there's kind of like 5 classifications. And you use them based on what your biggest need is. So again, first is hormones and thyroid. And then after that, we can look at the peptides based on what your biggest need is. And I think most people, especially women, who are aging, and my wife is 54, and aging incredibly well and gracefully and stuff like that, and doing all the things that we're talking about. And we can talk about her if you want, but we really, really have to understand, like, what is the biggest issue? For most people, it's fat loss, right? For most people, it's insulin resistance. They have too much inflammation, which, by the way, they're all related. The more fat you have, the more insulin resistant you are, and the more inflammatory processes are going on in the body. So if we can reduce the fat, we're going to suppress inflammation and we're going to improve insulin sensitivity naturally.
Right, right. I agree with all that. I'm actually going to be 70 next year.
That's awesome. You look amazing.
Oh,
I would never have guessed that. That is amazing. Congratulations on that. That's absolutely insane.
I actually am looking forward to it. But it's funny though, because I'm on HRT right now, and I don't have any issues with it. I won my IFBB Pro card on my 60th birthday, and
that's awesome.
I was having a lot of problem in the gym, trying to put on muscle. So I went in with my OBGYN. I wanted a hormone panel done. We did it. And of course, everything came back zilch. And she was like, well, but this is where you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
You're in your early 60s. I go, well, you don't get it. This is not where I want to be.
Right.
Be
Right.
hormonally optimized, and we got into a big argument about it. And then she was just like, well, if you're complaining about this, unexplained, belly fat that you have, maybe you should look into cool sculpting.
That, by the way, she probably sells so she can make money, correct?
I was so mad. I walked out of the office and I never went back. But anyway, yeah,
Right.
so many women out there, just like you said, are inflamed, not feeling well. And if as soon as they, get their hormones optimized, then things are going to be so much better. But we need to do that first before we can even start looking into peptides.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, way too many women don't do that first. And we're now in this world, and I don't want to
Especially
interrupt
with the
your train of
GLP.
thought. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to get to that. But that's what I was about to say. So you're reading my mind. We're having a Vulcan mind meld. But yeah, too many people see peptides as the shiny object syndrome. And they want to do all of these peptides at once, right? Like, oh, I want some brain cognitive restoring, and I want the GLP, and I also want the fat loss, and I want the mitochondria, and I want the, anti-aging. And the truth is like we don't want to do any of that. We want to do exactly what we've already talked about. We first want to make sure we're hormonally optimized and balanced, which is again really the key. If you don't do that or work towards doing that, and to your point about you can't go to your family doctor. None of these people have any practice or skills or even education in doing that as you experience. And so I always tell people like, look, if you're going to do this right, you have to go to a doctor who's cash pay because they don't work for insurance because insurance doesn't subrogate this. They're not going to pay for you to be hormonally optimized because again, they don't want you healthy, Helen. They want you sick, fat, and inflamed so that you're buying their bullshit pills and potions and medications so that again, die according to the insurance algorithm at 67, metabolically broken and obviously sometimes financially broken because they've taken so much money from you. That's literally how the permutational algorithm in insurance works. Like most people die in their late 60s, due to all of this dysregulation and sick care medicine pills that they're on. In fact, the average 66-year-old person in America right now is on 17 different medications. Think about that. 17 different medications. And as you know, none of them are for health. They're literally to control contraindications and side effects from the other bullshit medications that they're taking. And look, another point is you can't go to your general practitioner, your family doctor, your PPO doctor, your HMO doctor, and say, "Hey, doc, I want you to help me to live to 130. Can you do it?" They literally look at you like you're insane. They'll be like, "What are you talking about?" Open up your mouth and say, right? They're only designed to find illness, to find sickness, to find something that's wrong with you. People like me, I don't go to the doctor. I would only go to a doctor if I was gut shot, bleeding out in a severe accident, where I had shrapnel in my body, or I was in a car accident where I had things broken and I had to have it reset. And to be honest with you, I'd probably go to a veterinarian to be reset before I went to one of these, medical facilities because it's a statistical fact. The number 2 cause of death in the world right now is doctors practicing. So it's like if you go into a hospital or to an urgent care clinic or any of these places and you don't expect something negative to happen, then you just don't understand what's going on. And again, most people don't, so it's like you really do have to become, as I say it, the empowered, proactive scientist of your own health because your doctor doesn't give a shit, as you've experienced, as thousands of people that I've spoken to have experienced. You cannot become optimally healthy working with sick care doctors. You have to seek people outside of that realm. And again, they're all cash pay, functional medicine doctors, longevity doctors, whatever you want to call them, who work with people like you and me and, other people like us who've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, because you're not going to find a doc in a box, in a general practitioner way who can actually hormonally optimize you. They don't have a clue. They'll do to you what your doctor did to you at that point.
Right, right. You're right 1,000%, especially women that are going through menopause. And that's another thing too. I mean, recovery, sleep, inflammation, like
Yes.
the whole conglomerate. So
It's very unfortunate. Women, I love working with women. My private membership group, which is fullyoptimizedhealth.com, it has more women than it has men. And it's because I always say this, like women are the most underserved community in the world when it comes to perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. The medical establishment has completely left you guys behind. It's totally up to you to seek treatment and to find health. And obviously it's out there, but it takes work. You surely cannot use your benefits, or your medical, little card that says this is my copayment to find that. I mean, I'm sure there's some outliers and there's some doctors that do that, but they're so far and few in between that it really is your personal, really ownership and accountability to do this on your own. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today is obviously find somebody that can hormonally optimize you. And then also hopefully you can work with them to use peptides. But if you can't, as you know, you can do it on your own. You can use research peptides and you can do this stuff on your own. You just have to educate yourself. And that's kind of one of the roles, that people like me play is, we write books, we do podcasts, we put a lot of free content out from our sites, teaching people how to do this. And like I said, it always comes back to becoming the empowered, proactive scientist of your own health, because there's no one out there that's going to help you. It's got to be on you to find this out.
Right, right. 12 years ago, I was diagnosed with leukemia. And
Oh,
luckily, up to this point, knock on wood, I have yet to have any treatment. And I think it's just because of my positive lifestyle and
sure, sure.
supplementation, peptides, etc. I love my oncologist, but it's so, just like you were saying, I go in there and I tell him, do you know anything about peptides? No.
No, no clue.
I said, okay, well, I've done a lot of research on this and I'm starting to take this. I'm taking BPC 157. I partially tore my rotator cuff, so I was on TB 500. And he was like, okay, I bought in the research, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. It's and also frustrating because there's so much helpful information out there about peptides for cancer patients. Although I have to be really careful, and I'd like to talk to you about this too, because
Sure.
there's a fine line of what people with cancer can take and then what people cannot take peptide wise, as far as, human growth factor. We don't want to
Right.
increase the growth of the tumors or the cancer in the body.
Yeah. So there is a lot to unpack there. Let me just say this to you first off. There's no way, if you've never had any actual side effects or proof that you have leukemia, it doesn't mean you have it. Look, diagnosis is people listen to doctors offering diagnoses, and there's a reason that you always have the right to get another opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, fifth opinion, right? I mean, again, it's going to cost you money to continue to go to these people and listen to them. But as I always say this, and now I'm going to go woo woo full blown on you, our thoughts become things. That is a fact. That is how this conscious level of reality works. What we manifest or what we think tends to manifest. What we think becomes real with action and obviously, positive mental attitudes towards achieving it. But the truth is that I don't take any doctor's diagnosis as my diagnosis. Like I'll just say, hey, that's your opinion, right? Like if I have an affirmation that says I am healthy, whole, and complete, and I do not receive your diagnosis, and then I go about living my life in a healthful way, just as you've done for the last 12 years or whatever it is since you received that diagnosis, there's no guarantee that you'll ever experience any of the symptoms that they say you're supposed to have. But most people, as you know, as soon as they receive the symptom diagnosis from the lab coat God, they instantly become the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Now I'm sick. Now I have to deal with this. Now these are what I'm going to expect. And so again, your mind goes to creating the reality that you perceive from the diagnosis, and now you're creating it. This is another reason why I tell people, do not ever go as a 55 or 50 or 48 or even 60-year-old person into these, routine diagnostic tests, because they're designed to find something wrong with you. And so if you don't do these things and you live healthy, which is, again, the biggest problem in America, most people don't live healthy. Most people treat their body like a dumpster fire, like literally a human garbage truck. They put in shitty food, shitty alcohol, smoke weed, vape, cigarettes. I mean, they're just constantly treating their body like I said, a dumpster fire. So it's a big if, but if you mentally don't receive it, and you live a lifestyle that is conducive to health, which obviously is what we're talking about here today, the likelihood that you're actually going to suffer from those symptomologies is very low. And by the way, cancer itself is a mental condition before it is a physical condition, because you actually have to have what I would call the lifestyle also with the negativity, this like self-obsession of like believing in something to actually create it. There's an amazing group of people in Canada called the Root Cause Institute, and they have been in this space like diagnosing and looking at people's cancer diagnosis for over 40 years. And they've actually categorized every single form of cancer that man or woman suffers from. And they can actually go back to like the origin of it in your current life of where it came from. Like they even, they can tell you like a man's prostate cancer comes from a lack of belief in their ability to provide for their family, their children, their wife, or whatever. And so a lot of these diagnoses that people have is basically due to this misperception or this, again, this misbelief that they are this person. And then they, again, believe in the diagnosis and the diagnosis becomes them. So if you are a person that's suffering from cancer as an actual diagnosis, you got to change your thoughts. And clearly you have to change your lifestyle. But I just don't ever give in to the idea that if they tell me that this is who I am or what I have, that I can't change that outcome or that perceptual outcome by living a lifestyle that is super clean and super, call it robustly healthy. Now, granted, there's always differentiation. There are people that definitely have like very insidious, rare forms of disease, cancer, autoimmune, disorders and stuff like that. But again, a lot of that stuff is because of their past, previous existence before they got the diagnosis. They were living in a place of like, if you look at the vibrational share, they were living in like apathy, guilt, shame, despair, blame, humiliation, that kind of stuff. And so they created that very caustic, cancerous tumor by being in a place where they didn't love and trust themselves for so long. And that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, when I was diagnosed, I realized right that split second that I was at a crossroads and I could be a victim or I could be a victim.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'm not going to be a victim. So, I mean, I have it. And just like you said, I've yet to experience any side effects, but I just think it's just my lifestyle. And it's not something that I don't feel victimized by it. I don't constantly live with it. It's a part of me. It's a layer of me, but it doesn't define me.
And by the way, that's 100% right. You chose not to receive the diagnosis by, like you said, being a victim. And as soon as you accept your diagnosis, you're now a victim to it. You are literally being controlled by the diagnosis and you believe what the doctor tells you. Oh, we got to do chemotherapy. Oh, you got to do this. Oh, you got to do that. And then you become negative because in your mind, you're like, oh shit, I have cancer. My lifespan is shortened. And so you never received that and you chose a different route. And again, empowered, sovereign, and free, the proactive scientist of your own health. And look where you are. You're about to turn 70 and you literally look like you're 50 years old.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Right. So it's mental. It's mental.
It's 100% mental. But there are peptides out there that, for me have helped me. But at the same time, there's other peptides out there that I know that I can't take just because I don't want to help along this diagnosis.
Sure.
Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, so I would disagree with you because that's what you've been told. I work with the leading oncologist humans on the planet who use peptides in their practices. And they say that unless you're overdosing those peptides, the likelihood that you're going to get tumorigenic or exacerbate a tumor. And again, we don't even know if you have this disease or this diagnosis, but like the reality is that the peptides that we're talking about, which I can go into, which would be, growth hormone agonist peptides, right? You're
Right.
looking at like tesamorelin, ipamorelin, CJC, there's others,
Yes.
AOD. The levels that people use of these peptides, again, therapeutically, would never, even though there's so many doctors that say and have told you the opposite, they would never exacerbate a tumor because they're not at a level where they're increasing angiogenesis, which again is increasing basically the tumorigenic or TPNF, that would increase the potential of the actual tumor, or maybe it's just even a latent cancer to exacerbate, which means express or to spread. And again, I've spoken to some of these oncologists. They're not people that go out in the media and talk about this, but Andrew Huberman has talked about angiogenic peptides potentially exacerbating cancer. And every time I hear it, by the way, in the mainstream, I laugh because the people that are talking about this are totally uninformed. And so, like I said, I work with some of the leading oncological experimental scientists. I don't even know what their names are, but they have like very, very advanced degrees in understanding cancer and the spread of cancer. And a couple of them have actually messaged me in public to say, hey, I just want you to know that the likelihood of people getting cancer or spreading cancer from using growth hormone or growth hormone agonist peptides is so low that it's just it's an unmitigated fear. And let me give you something else. The people that use growth hormone in the highest dosages in the world are dwarfs. Now, dwarfs use 25, and these are children, right? They use anywhere from 25 to 30 IUs of growth hormone a day, which, by the way, from an anti-aging dosage, that would be 1 IU a day for a month. For most people, from an anti-aging perspective, using these things, these people are using that in one day in their children. And do you know how many incidences of cancer have shown up in dwarfs in like 45 years of research?
Wow.
Zero.
Wow.
Zero.
Very
Never. Never. So everything that you have been told about cancer being exacerbated by peptides or growth hormone is likely bullshit and fear porn because they don't want you potentially curing a disease that they make a lot of money on. Now, I've said this many, many times, never on a podcast. So here now I've publicly said this. I don't want people to confuse what I'm saying, though. I don't want people to think that the possibility of spreading a tumor, and I don't mean spreading, but exacerbating the formation of a tumor that is, just call it in remission or is latent, is not still there. But what I am saying is that 99% of people using growth hormone or peptides therapeutically, let's define that, therapeutically, are not going to accelerate or exacerbate the spread of a cancer. This is fear porn. This is doctors trying to scare people in not using peptides in the same reason that they tell you, oh, I don't know anything about peptides. I'm an oncological doctor. I work in oncology, but I don't know anything about peptides because the system doesn't want me to know anything about peptides, because if they did, we might cure cancer or have, forms of cures. And again, cancer is big business. As Chris Medicine used to say, there's no money in the cure. The money is in the medicine. So you're not going to find a lot of people in the allopathic cancer world who are ever going to promote peptides, but you will hear them scream fear. Peptides are going to exacerbate tumors, TPNF, et cetera, because I've heard it all a million times. But like I said, I'll just go back to the people that are way smarter than me in this space, and they're saying there is no way that using peptides or growth hormone therapeutically that you're ever going to see that. Now, there is one other thing to say in the bodybuilding world, because you're a competitor. Those guys and gals that take massive super physiologic dosages of shit do not apply to this conversation. You and I are talking about biohackers and anti-aging and longevity people who are, again, using microdoses and therapeutic dosages. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about somebody who's massively abusing and taking super physiologic levels. And of course, whenever you do that, there's always an inherent risk.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So you've watched peptides move from these like small, intimate, fringe conversations now to like mainstream wellness now. I mean, it's just like everywhere
It is.
All the biohacking conferences that I've been to, the podcasts, I mean, everything that you see. What excites you most about this shift, and what concerns you most about the shift?
So that's a great question. I'll start with concerns first. So unfortunately, there are way too many research companies that are scandalous. They are bad actors. They are, and let me explain what that means. I don't think anybody who gets into peptides truly has is ill-intentioned or is evil or malevolent. I just think that they don't understand what they're doing for the most part, and they're trying to make a quick buck. And so what they do is they buy from Chinese companies who are obviously wholesaling. All you have to do is go on WhatsApp for a week or Telegram for a week, and one of these companies will reach out to you, right? But the truth is that the companies that are not doing everything right, and I'll define what is right in a second, are buying 100 vials, 200 vials, 500 vials, 1,000 vials from these Chinese companies at wholesale prices, and going by the company itself validating that the products they're buying are 99% pure. And the truth is that, and again, thankfully for most US consumers and anybody using research peptides, they mostly are. But if they send you 80 vials or 100 vials, 80 will be 99% pure and 20 will be fake. So if you're selling these products and you're obviously filling up your inventory with these kind of supply and channels or manufacturing channels, eventually you're selling 30% bunk peptides. And to define what is real and what is good, my company, BioLongevity Labs, we are buying from FDA registered, GMP compliant facilities that manufacture in the United States. And what does that mean? Well, they finish the product in the United States and they lyophilize the product in the United States. All API, which is basically active pharmaceutical ingredients. That's what API stands for. It comes out of either China or India. That's for every peptide in the world, whether it's a compounded, doctor prescribed, or it's a research use only. They all come out of either China or India. There's no peptide synthesis in the United States. Now, when I say there is some, but it's such a small amount that almost all of the main peptides that people are familiar with, from GLPs to GH agonists to cognitive restoring to anti-aging, they're all synthesized as API, again, which is active pharmaceutical ingredient in China or India, and then shipped to the US, where they're then lyophilized, bottled, labeled, and finished, right? So it's like people say all the time, including us, manufactured in the USA, because we do have a chain of custody that shows that we do lyophilize in the US, we do label and bottle and finish in the United States and then ship to the end user. But again, people have to understand that the processing of synthesized chemicals and actual active pharmaceutical ingredient comes out of China or India. I want that to be very clear so people understand that. But the reality of it is that in a legit company, which would be like us, Core, there's other people, we have batch and lot numbers of all of our products so that you can independently go online and look up these products and see that they met sterility processing control, they were in GMP compliant facilities, and that you can trace them back through independent third-party verification in case there's a bad group of them. Let's say one product is causing side effects in somebody. You can go online and you can independently verify. Most research companies, unfortunately, do not spend the money to do this kind of testing. They don't have this kind of what is called chain of custody. And so when you use them, you're literally flipping a coin that you're actually getting a legitimate product. And as I already told you, Helen, like most people do not get tainted products, which makes the peptide space relatively safe, but you could be getting fake products. And when you see really cheap priced peptides, like in comparison to what we price our peptides at, it's 99.9% that they're fake or counterfeit, because nobody in the space is selling them to give them away, right? Everybody's running a business. I know what peptides cost from a wholesale, from a pharmaceutical ingredient, and from a manufacturer perspective all across the world. And so when people come to me and say, oh, Jay Campbell's a scammer, he sells blank at $149 for 10 milligrams and I can get it for $59, I laugh, because I know that those people are buying fake peptides. So that's the answer to your question. Like the worst case is that there's a lot of fake, bunk, counterfeit, research use peptides. The answer to the other side is that I never thought that we would ever see this, where we were having this conversation and we were talking about everything that I'm talking about in the mainstream, as you said, because that's what peptides are now going. And, as somebody like me who's an OG, who's been in this space forever, literally using these things for close to 23 years, hormones for 26, I never expected it to get to this. I never thought that, we would actually have this sort of mainstream aggregation and really just propaganda where it's like, holy shit, this is going to become the new big thing. And, very truthfully, to kind of segue to the book, I have a chapter about everything that's in the pipeline. And, when we say retatrutide, tirzepatide are amazing, and we can talk about those, as GLP-2 and GLP-3, in 2 years, they may be irrelevant. Yeah. Because there's GLP-4 and GLP-5, and obviously, we have FLGR242, and you combine that with retatrutide, you're already at a GLP-4. So it's like, it's just a crazy time. We are in a biomedical, biochemical revolution, and the people that are not experiencing peptides right now, are not understanding them, are really at a disadvantage. In fact, they're actually going to be left behind because, as you know, within the next 2 to 3 years, people will be extending their life. They
Yeah.
will be leaner, stronger, more muscular, more able. They'll be in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and living robust lives. And the people that don't know about these will still be connected to sick care. They will be decrepit, invalids, women and men bent over with osteoporosis.
Get all this
So
out.
we're at the point now where you literally the line is in the sand and you either choose the sick care, this is my benefits and this is my copay route, or you choose our route, which is sovereign, empowered, and free. And you're taking advantage of all of these amazing, chemicals and using them to maximize and optimize your life.
Right, right. You talk a lot about personal responsibility in biohacking too. How do you balance that empowerment with safety, especially when it comes to the access of getting peptides?
It's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. So congratulations for asking me that. First off, it starts with education. So like my book, right, that just came out, which is again, Metabolic Awakening with GLP Peptides, it's 700 plus pages and close to 1,300 scientific references. Like I hammer the research because I want people to know that I do respect science. I don't think that science is the be all end all that some people think it is, like Andrew Huberman, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all N of one. We're all biochemically unique and individual. So you can't say that the study says this in those 10 or 20 or 200 comorbid people who are sick and diabetic and probably fat is going to relate to somebody who's like you and me, who's in our 50s, 60s, and 70s, who's metabolically healthy and low body fat and low inflammation. So you're talking about two different people, but I think what's most important is education. And in order to be safe versus sorry, you really do have to understand how to use these therapies correctly. And again, I say this in the book, and this is in the opening of the book, 95% of people using GLP peptides, and I would actually extrapolate that to even be all peptides, which we kind of said earlier in the call, are doing this wrong because they're not hormonally balanced or optimized. They don't know they need to be hormonally balanced and optimized.
That's the big one.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That's the big
And then
one.
exactly. And then in the case of GLPs, because these are such powerful drugs, they take too high of a dose, which by the way, does come from the doctor, does come from the pharmaceutical company, and then they don't change their lifestyle. So all the side effects that we see and we hear about, all the class action lawsuits, all of them are easily preventable. They're actually avoidable. And I talk about this in the book, but people have to understand one, the dosage, which as you know is a microdose. And then two, they have to change their lifestyle. They're not easy buttons. They're not magic bullets. We do have to live our lifestyle according to how the GLP in a microdose is going to affect it. And again, 95% of people, they take the drug. They don't know they need to change their lifestyle. They don't eat enough protein. They don't lift weights. They're not hormonally optimized. They don't get enough sleep. They don't live insulin controlled, onward and onward. And so all of those horrible side effects that they end up looking like, cancer patients with their face collapsed in, their butt collapsed in. I mean, again, you look at these people, look at a lot of these Hollywood actors and actresses, they literally look like death.
Horrible.
They look like death. And it's because they have no earthly idea how to use these products. So my book is truly the first book in the marketplace that breaks down how to use these products in the context of health and longevity. And look, I have a chapter in there that I'm really super proud of. It's called the Transformation Chapter. And it's 16 men and women from all walks of life, all ethnic backgrounds, all economic levels and realities, who write in their own words how this drug, when used again contextually as a microdose with doing all the things that we write about in the book, dramatically changed their world, changed their lifestyle, changed their job perspectives, changed their child, everything about their life was transformed. And you hear it in their own words. Like I have nothing to do with it, right? So it's like you really can listen to other people's perceptions, but it's not perception. It's based on reality because they actually did this right. And, many of them started off doing it wrong. And then they found my data or found my information and started doing it correctly and everything changed. And I mean this, my mom died in 2023. She was 77 when she died, 76. She would be 79 now. And she was metabolically deranged. She was obese the last 20 years of her life. She died of COVID, of course, which was the fake diagnosis so that the hospital could get paid. They were in Atlanta. But, once I saw and experienced my mom's death and gone through it, I literally said, you know what? I'm a pretty smart guy. I have a pretty awesome, audience and opportunity in front of me. I can literally teach the world how to end obesity. I can teach the world how to end insulin resistance, how to end all of these horrible things that come from, again, just call it metabolic dysregulation with these amazing therapies. But, back to your original question, we have to educate people. And the educational part of this is what's totally wrong, bankrupt, slash even corrupt. Because as you know this, the pharmaceutical companies don't want people educated. They don't want people healthy. They want to sell you the highest dose over the longest time and get you addicted, get your receptors blown out so that you keep coming back and keep failing. Because if you don't fail, and this is the big thing that I write about in the book, because this is the number one question people ask me, oh, do you have to take a GLP for life? No. But if you're educated about them and how to use them correctly, again, defined as in the context of health and longevity, it's always a tool, Helen, that's right there in the background that you can throw in whenever you need, right? If you go off the wagon at 72 because you break your hip or you're in a car accident and you put on 25 or 30 pounds in the 6 months that you can't lift or exercise, you can go back on a microdose of retatrutide or whatever it is, the stuff coming, FLGR or something like that, and you can have your body back in 90 days. Yeah. So it's really just a tool. It's not a crutch. It's not a holy grail. It's not an easy button. It's not a super molecule. It's just a tool that if you understand how to use, you always have it in your tool belt or in your arsenal to optimize your metabolic health. And that's how I sell this or, explain the data in the book. It's not an easy button and it's not something to rely on, every day of your life, the rest of your life. It's just something to know that you have in the tool belt that you can always use to help you when necessary.
Right. And even as a IFBB, a competitor, it's interesting to see that a lot of these athletes, 2 or 3 weeks out, a month out, are doing little microdoses of Retta just to tighten them up because those last couple of weeks, it can be tough.
100%.
And it's amazing how well that stuff works.
By the way, it's changing. I just came from the Arnold. Okay, I was just there in this weekend and I saw all the pros.
I've been so many times. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was up there with the guys, all the staff, my team from BioLongevity. We had a meet and greet for 2 days and then we also walked around the expo and stuff. But look, I talked to a lot of the people, some of the pros, that I know and I work with and stuff like that. And I could tell you that of all 5 finalists in the men's the super heavyweight, they're all using retatrutide. Every single one. And, when I tell people that we are in the beginning stages of a revolution in performance enhancement and, bodybuilding or, call it, bikini, physique, whatever it is, just basically competitive fitness. That's what I mean, because we will see people in the next 3 to 5 years beyond all comprehension, looking better, bigger, leaner, and more muscular than ever, because that's what these drugs represent. They are a pharmaceutical revolution. It's just you have to use them correctly. And thankfully, in bodybuilding, there's a lot of smart people. And obviously, they're way advanced in medicine. And so they are already using tiny dosages and they're maximizing, insulin signaling, nutrient partitioning, carbohydrate digestion, glycogen repletion, like all of these things, because of these drugs, are revolutionizingly optimizing and maximizing physiques, both men and women, and will continue to do so as the science improves.
Right, right. I want to switch over and talk about menopause real quick because I think that women going through menopause and peptide therapy is like, to me, a hand in hand, skip down the lane.
No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. So look, I'll talk about my wife. So my wife is 54. She's absolutely in menopause. She was in perimenopause from probably like 48 to 52. But in the last couple of years, she doesn't bleed. She's not menstruating anymore. So she's definitely, as it's defined, in menopause, but she's amazing. She's controlled her hot flashes, which obviously most women experience at some point, in peri to post or to even full blown. And, she obviously uses hormones. She uses progesterone. She uses a little bit of estradiol. And she's taking every peptide under the sun. She uses retatrutide. She uses like 0.10 once a week. And all she uses it for, because she's super lean, is for, food noise. And look, we didn't talk about this, but let's talk about that for a second. This is really big for women experiencing perimenopause and menopause. But again, there's a lot of brainwave changing, right? You're not producing testosterone, which isn't cleaving into estrogen. You obviously now have to use, if you're smart, therapeutic hormones to create that same, call it synergy and balance that you had when you were younger. And so once you do that, there's also lots of stuff going on in the brain, right? You've got all sorts of like free oxy radicals, you got AKGs, glycolytic end products, all these things that are negative as we age, just from living clean and living hard and training hard and exercising hard and all that stuff. A small dose of retatrutide is getting rid of all these inflammaging, call it breakdown, byproducts in the brain. So by using a tiny dose, sure, you get a little bit of metabolic upregulation and insulin signaling and nutrient partitioning, but you actually change the brainwave so that you don't have any addiction to emotional-based comfort foods or a desire to eat shitty foods. Like that's one of the biggest things that we talk about in the book is the studies show that when you dose these drugs appropriately, again, in a clinically precise dose or microdose, you eliminate food noise. You eliminate alcohol addiction. You eliminate wine addiction. You eliminate the, again, obsessive compulsive need to eat foods that you have a craving for, which again, as you know, the fast food industry creates these chemicals that make people hyperpalative addictive and they can't overcome it in the brain. So that's what these GLPs are doing is they're overcoming this negative chemical addiction that people have, especially again in perimenopause and menopause, which again is very prevalent because again, your body is not functioning like it was when you had these hormones and just call it all these things functioning through your biological system as you did naturally. So a lot of this stuff helps with that. And you're not going to get anybody in medicine to tell you that because they're not aware. They do not teach doctors in medical school or in rounds or even in practice after how to optimize. It's all about sick care. It's all about diagnosing symptoms and giving them drugs to, address the symptoms and stuff like that. So this is kind of stuff I'm talking about. You're not going to get from a doctor, and you're not going to hear it even most longevity clinics because they don't understand this yet. But again, I'm deep in the weeds of the research and looking at what's happening. And I've analyzed literally almost every single study that was any relevant on GLPs. And I think one of the things to say is, and this is, by the way, in the book, but, for the people that will never read it because it's such a big book, if you start off with a microdose, and again, 95% of people don't, but if you're not exposed to GLPs and you have this opportunity now to say, oh, Jay Campbell's a pretty smart guy, I'm going to start off with a microdose, it's 90% likely that you will maintain the weight loss or the metabolic, rewiring. I shouldn't say metabolic, but just the synaptic or the dendritic or serotonergic rewiring of the brain permanently. And that's what the studies show. So again, just a microdose for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, will create permanent lasting change that will enable you to be healthier, have less inflammation, have less addictive food cravings or stuff like that. So there's a lot here, with these tools. I don't want people to think that, again, they're the be all end all, but they're really just tools. And if you understand how to use them correctly, that they're the most amazing tools ever. But again, most people never learn how to use these correctly. And that's what my book is doing such, I think, a good job of teaching people how to do that.
Well, all your books. I mean, the first time I ever wanted to learn about peptides, I bought your book. And so
Thank you.
it was great. And so, I mean, I've learned a whole lot. I was actually going to a peptide doctor who was charging me, out the wazoo. And I was
A
like,
lot of money.
I can do this on my own. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
it's,
Well, it's important that we say what you just said, because I think it's important for people to understand this, because most people don't know this. In the next 2 weeks, and it might be shorter, it might be tomorrow, it could be anytime. RFK has been going out publicly and telling everybody that they're about to roll back all the peptides that were classified as type 2 in 2023 to type 1, which really just means, for the average listener, it means that they're going to be legally prescribable from any doctor. So as soon as that happens, Helen, it is going to go like this. The cost of pharmaceutically approved and medically prescribed peptides is going to literally go through the roof. The average person is going to see these prices and they're going to have a shit fit. They're going to be like, I'm not paying $1,400 for a 10 milligram vial of MOTS-C, right? When you can get it from a research company like BioLongevity Labs for $100. So no one is going to, in my opinion, and obviously I'm a shill for research, and I'm also a shill for, empowered, sovereign, and free, teaching people how to do this themselves instead of relying on the doctor or the system. But I personally think that this is going to push more people into the research. And again, we call it the direct to consumer space because, like you said, who is going to go and pay $5,000 a month for 5 peptides? I mean, I don't see it. Yes, there are wealthy people who will. They will say, "Oh, I want the doctor regulated approach because I think it's safer." It's not safer. That's just what they think because that's what the doctors tell them. But the truth is, it's easier because the doctors reconstitute the peptides and they give them the syringes a lot of times with the water already in it, et cetera. So it really just comes down to who are you? Are you going to get ripped off and go the doctor route? And some people will.
Yeah.
Or are you going to be like you and me and be like, I'm not going to get raped. I'm going to do this myself and I'm going to learn how to educate myself so that I don't make the mistakes that most people are afraid of making. And it's never been easier. My books, my podcast, there are other smart people, smarter than me that, also talk about this. And it's so.
Right. Did I lose you? Can I hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got it now. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's good. No, I agree 1,000%. And the first time, like when I had to start, I started on HRT and I had to give myself a shot. But, I was just like panicking. So many people are afraid. And when I finally did it with that little insulin needle, I'm like, that's it. I've been petrified my whole life. And
99% of people, by the way, are
that's the
like
biggest
that.
problem is that people don't want to give themselves a shot. And so they're like, I'm not doing it, So
And then once you do it one time, as you found out, it's like, this is a joke. It's like brushing your teeth.
it's totally, I just laughed at myself thinking all the years of terror that I experienced over nothing. But anyway, let's talk about muscle real quick. Muscle
Sure.
strength and body composition over 50. Muscle
Yes.
has literally become a non-negotiable. You hear it just pounded over and over and over. Yet I come across so many women that I know who don't lift weights.
It's incredible.
And I'm just like, muscle is longevity. That's
Yes, that's exactly right. And in fact, there's a lot to unpack. Muscle is all the statistics and studies show that you will live the longest possible by being the leanest. And when you're lean, a couple of things, right? You have no levels of systemic inflammation. So, like, a lot of women, when you say, oh, you want to have a lot of muscle as you get older, they instantly think of giant bodybuilding chicks who are juiced up and they don't understand what it means. What it really means is the leaner you are, the more muscle by extension you naturally have, right? Because if you don't have fat, then everything else is either bone or muscle. And obviously, you're going to have more muscle than bone. It's just the way the body is designed with all the skin tissue. So the truth is that if you get lean, and I'll define that in a second, you are statistically provable living longer. All the octogenarians and the blue zone people are usually Asian. And, no, they're not muscular for the most part, but they have no body fat and inflammation. They're very, very thin. They eat a lot of fish. They eat a lot of white rice, a lot of macrobiotic food. So they have no levels of inflammation. But if you take this and we start looking at people like us, who are now going to be the ultimate, I call it octogenarians or people living longest and strongest. Because as you said earlier in the show, it's not about lifespan, it's about health span. We don't want to be in our 90s hooked up to machines. We want to be in our 90s climbing, picking up our grandchildren, living still a relatively robust life, jumping in and out of our bed, in and out, et cetera. So it's like, this is what's important. And obviously all the things that we've talked about today will support that. But the truth is that most people, and this is where I really buckle down, most people have no fucking idea. I'm sorry I swore, but I want to get the word in. They have no idea how to train. And, this when you go to the gym, you see people, because obviously you're close to 70 years young and you've been training a long time now. And you see people in there all the time who are doing what you're doing and they have no idea what they're doing. Yeah. And it's a real problem because social media has now made it worse. People will not hire professional qualified coaches, trainers, instructors, and would rather watch their influencer on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, performing, and they're not athletic. They've never been, understanding how to train in previous life or earlier in their life. And so they just make horrible form, terrible technique. They're not contracting muscle fibers. And so they're not building muscle. But I always say this, like, especially as a woman, because the number one cause of death for women is a spiral hip fracture, right? They have osteoporosis.
My mother, yes.
Exactly. But it's all women if they live long enough to get there. It's not obese women because they die way younger, but like basically if you live long enough as a woman and you don't train with weights, you don't eat enough protein, you don't hormonally optimize, which again is the majority of boomers, you're going to fall, you're going to have a spiral hip fracture, and then your central nervous system is going to collapse. And we can easily avoid this even in our 70s and 80s, right? Because I'm sure you have women in their 70s and 80s watching this. They can go to the gym and hire a professional coach and trainer, clinical strength and special, conditioning specialist, whatever, to teach them how to build muscle. And it doesn't take anything other than 2 to 3 20-minute sessions a week training to progressive, or what I call positive muscle failure, progressive overload. And it's very, very simple. It's not dangerous. You're not putting your body or your soft tissues, your joints or your tendons at risk. You just have to know how to do this. And again, I always say this, and it's unfortunate and sad, Helen, but most adults who go to the gym to train literally have no idea what they are doing. Their form and their technique and their performance is a F minus. And they don't decide to ask people how to help them. And it pains me because, as you know, one thing you learn in your life as you get older is that you can't volunteer to help people unless they actually want the help, right? The teacher appears when the student is ready, and most people don't want your help. And so you can't intervene and say, look, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, or lady, you don't know what you're doing, right? They have to come to you and say, hey, could you show me how to perform this correctly? Can you show me how to execute this rep? And that's the one thing that drives me nuts is like, I'm in the gym all the time and I see people and I shake my head, but at the same time, I realize that it's not my purpose and not my place to actually offer them help. You have to desire the help yourself. And I think for women who are watching this show, you already said it, there's of all the other things we talked about, which are great, the number one thing you can do is literally start lifting weights if you're not doing it now. And you can't do it if you don't do it right. It's a waste of time by going to the gym and not doing it right. And if you don't know if you're not doing it right, that means you're not doing it right. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, but they don't know they're not doing it right. And I'm sitting there looking at
Exactly.
them there, and I'm like, what muscle are they working on? Because they're just doing the most insane movements.
It's insane. It's literally insane.
What peptides are most commonly discussed in relation to muscle preservation and recovery?
Yeah, great question. If you asked me this 4 years ago, I would have told you a different answer. But I think right now, for most women aging, and this applies to men too, they're all battling body fat, right? They're all battling creep, just issues with bone mineral density. I think a small, tiny, very tiny, I mean like a tiniest of tiny microdose of GLP-3 or GLP-2. If they're buying research, they get GLP-3. If they're using docs, it's GLP-2. And again, GLP-3 will be coming from docs very soon because it's going to be approved. But again, when I say a microdose, I mean literally 0.10 once or twice a week. Do you realize they start men and women in the trials at 6 milligrams and then take them to 12 milligrams? Now, remember, these are fat, obese, inflamed, dumpster fire humans. And we're talking about, the women that watch your show, which obviously there's some people that probably are that, but most of them are probably just looking to lose a little bit of pounds. So always have a base once or twice a week, a couple times a month. Maybe if you really have a lot of weight, lose twice a week for 4 to 6 weeks. A base GLP-3, obviously I recommend GLP-3 over GLP-2. A growth hormone agonist peptide, 100%. Growth hormone, if you can get an actual pharmaceutical approved, like a genotropin from Pfizer, or really high-end growth hormone, 1 IU a day, is proven statistically to build bone mineral density, to strengthen muscles, to improve deep polyphasic sleep, et cetera. There's a lot of that. But if you can't get that, Growth hormone agonist peptides like tesamorelin, like ipamorelin, like CJC. These are amazing. Of course, you got to be using therapeutic hormones, like testosterone, estradiol, and progesterone. Again, microdoses of that. And then I would always throw in a mitochondrial optimizing peptide. There's oral versions like SLU PP-332, injectable versions like SS31, 5-amino, NAD, and MOTS-C. But those are your really primary needle movers. As long as you're, again, hormonally optimized and using a tiny, tiny microdose of GLP to get the weight off. But I see those things as kind of like primary, and then, secondary would be the fat loss, growth hormone agonist, or muscle building peptides, like I just mentioned, and then a mitochondrial optimizing peptide to really keep the mitochondrial sharp as you age.
Great advice. What mistakes do women make when trying to build muscle later in life?
Well, we kind of already talked about that. You have to lift weights. I've had women argue with me. They're like, nope, I do hot Pilates, and I do like a lot of bone mineral, or how would I say it? Like, pushing, resistance. What's the other word I want to use? Like basically where you're supporting your body weight, doing hot Pilates.
Right.
Like, I can get away with that. But again, you have to be doing it at a resistance level that is effective. Clearly, you and I both know that weights is the easiest path forward to maintain that. And again, you don't need to be lifting heavy. You don't need to be putting your body in a compromised position. I don't think anybody in their 60s or 70s should be doing any kind of heavy squats or deadlifts. You can lift with, 25 to 50 to 100 pounds, depending on your strength level, and do a lot of reps, do the same thing. I mean, obviously those exercises are proven and amazingly productive, but you also don't want to put your joints and your soft tissues in compromising positions. So obviously, start low, go slow, be smart, make sure you're doing the techniques correctly. And then again, I think it's just, you have to be on hormones. You cannot be in your 60s and 70s or even 80s and living your best life if your hormones are not optimized. It's impossible.
I agree.
Impossible.
I agree 1,000%. And another thing I think is so important, I did some online fitness coaching a while ago, and every single client that I worked with, every single woman doesn't eat enough. And
Right.
doesn't eat enough protein.
Definitely. Yep.
And they can't understand why they're not losing any weight.
Dude, 90% of women across all society, even hormonally optimized women, are protein malnourished. They do not eat enough protein. Again, the theories or the BS of like, oh, I'm going to get big and bulky, or, if I eat too much protein, I'm going to get fat or something like that. Like, it's almost impossible as an aging woman to gain weight from eating protein. It's literally impossible. Again, it's the thermic effect of breaking down protein is the toughest macronutrient to actually burn. So if you're, let's just put it this way. If you're a 150-pound woman and you are, let's say 100 pounds, 100 to 110 pounds is muscle and bone, you should be eating somewhere between 125 and 150 grams of protein every single day. I always say this, like, whatever your goal body weight is, the amount of protein grams you should be consuming literally day in and day out. And you're right. If you don't eat enough protein and you use a GLP, you're going to lose muscle. And the more muscle that you lose, the more metabolically deficient or dysfunctional you're going to become over time, which will automatically lead to inflammation and body fat. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't care if you're 85 or you're 55, you will put on fat, visceral fat especially, that is very, very harmful and very pro-inflammatory if you're not eating enough protein and even doing all the other things that we talked about. Again, if you're hormonally optimized or attempting to get hormonally optimized, if you're not eating enough protein, it's not going to work.
Right. What about peptides that support mitochondrial function and cellular repair?
So again, my favorite, SS31, which is now known as lamipretide. Unfortunately, the FDA approved it recently. So it's very hard to get now. I think BioLongevity Labs is going to have it in a very limited run very soon. And we're going to change the label on it because we don't want to deal with cease and desist from the manufacturer of it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with selling it. They're not against it, but you got to use the right name and nomenclature. And they're kind of delayed right now on that. But that's an amazing mitochondrial amplifying peptide. Everything that you do, if you're doing all the things conducively, is improved. Hormones are improved. Cellular signaling cascades are improved. So I love that peptide. You also have MOTS-C, which obviously is a great peptide for people that have too much, just call it visceral body fat, inflammation, insulin resistance. And then the other two that I would mention are NAD plus and 5-amino 1MQ, which are also injectable. BioLongevity Labs sends a blend. We call it metabolic or metabolic, and it's NAD, 5-amino, and MOTS-C together. And it's really, really good for optimizing mitochondria.
Very interesting. Another great question, I think, is what role does mindset play in the biological aging with people, especially women?
It's everything. It's 100% everything. If you are one of those women that goes to your doctor and listens to what they say and accepts all their diagnoses, you're not going to age as well as somebody who doesn't. I'm not saying the doctors are evil, but your mindset 100% determines your health. If you wake up every single day thinking that you're sick, thinking that you're old, thinking that you're less than or lack, et cetera, insert that, then that's what you're going to be. If you wake up every single morning saying, you know what, I'm grateful to be here. My fingers, my arms, everything works. I'm going to go to the gym with like a lot of robustness. I'm going to eat my protein shake this morning or eat my, egg whites and turkey or whatever it is, again, to get my protein. And I'm going to go into my day with like a vivaciousness that I had in my 20s and 30s. Then that's exactly what you're going to be. You are literally programming your cells with your thoughts. So you're either 69/70 years young like you, or you're 69 or 70 years old, just literally depending on your thought processes. It's really as simple as that. Your mindset controls your life.
And this is going to be like one of the last questions. If you could give one guiding principle to women 50 plus exploring peptides, what would it be?
Great question. First off, obviously, make sure you're hormonally optimized or attempting to become hormonally optimized. Do not start off with peptides if you're hormonally dysregulated, if your thyroid dysregulated. Get that handled first. And then depending on what your biggest need is, whether or not you have inflammation, insulin resistance, and too much body fat, get on a microdose of a GLP. Again, I recommend GLP-3. And then use a mitochondrial optimizing peptide. Again, depending on how much body fat you have to lose. If it's a lot or if it's more than average, I would use MOTS-C. And if it's not, and you are just attempting to get truly optimized and more energetic, I would actually use SLU PP-332.
Okay. I want to do a quick lightning round. So
Okay,
first thing that comes to mind. Number one biohacking habit that you never skip.
One biohacking habit that I'd never skip, morning meditation or introspection. Like I go out in nature, even if I'm on the road, which is a lot these days. If I'm home, which I've been home since Sunday afternoon, so I've had 2 days here. I'm in the backyard with my dog, sun gazing, and I'm lucky in that I live in Tampa, Florida, so I get a lot of sun. But I'm in there for 20 minutes. And in that 20 minutes, I'm shutting off my mind. I'm not worried about who I have to talk to that day, what podcast I have to do later. What accounts or clients I have to intervene with or interject with. I'm just literally sitting there in stillness with gratitude. A lot of times, because people say, oh man, I wish I could be like that. I say, look at your dog. If you have a dog, a lot of people do, watch your dog breathe. Watch your dog interact with nature. Watch how they sniff or how they look at the sun or how the sun glazes off of their snout or their nose or their lips or whatever. Like just focus on connecting with your dog, because I always tell people this, like your dog is vibrating at a level, in the consciousness scale of unconditional love, especially when it's around its owner or its master. So connect with your dog's vibrational energy and you will get into silence and stop thinking about all of the nonsense. What I call the drunk monkey mind, the mind chatter, and just be in that state for that 15 or 20 minutes. And, a lot of people are like, dude, I don't have the time. I got to hustle. I got to get in the morning commute, et cetera. There's always time. You have to make time and create time in your schedule.
Right. That's true. Morning person or night owl?
You know what? I used to be a night owl earlier in my life, but now I'm much more of a morning person in that I get more done in the morning because it's a hyper focus of mine to get stuff done in the morning. And so it goes back to what I just said. You create your reality with your thoughts. So if your schedule's tight based on your work-life balance, wake up earlier, go to bed earlier, wake up earlier.
I'm the same. One supplement almost everyone over 50 should consider.
Metformin. Metformin is the most studied blood glucose regulating drug in the history of mankind. It's very misunderstood. I have an article, or not an article, it's an article that I wrote in 2019 that is actually published on EDU and Harvard Medical, of all the reasons to use metformin as an anti-aging, again, called blood glucose regulation or suppressing drug. And it also covers all of the negative press and all of the people that have attacked metformin, saying that it causes mitochondrial dysfunction or dysregulation or any of that, and proves that it's nonsense. Again, it's the most studied drug in the history of mankind. It's in a trial right now. It's the first drug ever to be looked at as a longevity agent. And I can definitely say this, the studies are not out yet, but the guy running the trial knows that I'm a giant metformin supporter, and he sends me messages all the time, and he says, when this trial ends, you are going to look like a genius to the world. So that's coming. The other thing I would just say is, and a lot of people don't know this, is you want to take that medication. And by the way, it's a plant. It's just that Big Pharma patented it in 1940 or 1939, I think, but it really is a plant. So it's found naturally. It grows at wild in the fields in southern France, but it increases what is called Akkermansia mucilus. And Akkermansia mucilus is a very benevolent antimicrobial growth in our microbiomes in our gut. And when you have a lot of it growing wild in your stomach, you're almost impervious to autoimmune conditions or disease. In fact, there's lots of scientific studies that show that people that were using metformin never got COVID. So it's one of those drugs. And again, I hate saying it's a drug because yes, it is pharmaceutically approved. It really is just a plant that they patented that does so many amazing things to improve full body health that everyone should be on it over the age of 50.
Great advice. Great advice. So pick one, strength training or cardio?
Both. I could never do one without the other. And here's why. Strength training, again, the leaner we are, the longer we'll live. Muscle is the key to resist the diseases of aging. But you also, as you age, you need cardio because you strengthen the vasculature network. You strengthen the vascular architecture. A lot of people in the bodybuilding space who are very fit, again, muscle-wise, don't do cardio and think that they're fine because they're lean. It's not true. You have to strengthen the heart as we get older. And it's like everything else, right? If it's left unused and you're not doing enough cardiovascular exercise, it can grow decrepit and it can grow frail. And a lot of the vascular networks become inefficient and sometimes clogged with plaque, right? So the more cardio that you do as you age, and again, I'm not advocating 2 hours a day. I'm advocating 20 to 30 minutes, responsible. I don't even recommend older people or, again, people in their 60s and 70s and 80s do a lot of high intensity. I think they should do steady state because all the science shows that steady state literally burns free fatty acids at rest. So you will be burning more calories for fuel metabolically while you're standing here doing a podcast like you and I are when you're more conditioned from doing steady state cardio. And steady state cardio as we age cannot be ballistic. You cannot be doing jumping or, anything else that puts your body at risk. And look, this is important. And a lot of people get mad at me when I say this. If you're running in your 60s or 70s, you are on a fast track to a knee and a hip and potentially ankle replacement because your body cannot handle the shearing forces when you're pounding, whether it's on a treadmill or even concrete, asphalt, or even dirt. A lot of people will be like, oh, dude, I run on beaches. You shouldn't be running on beaches in your 60s and 70s. That's causing lots of stress to muscles and ligaments and tendons that don't need it at that age. So again, make your cardio moderate intensity, low impact. Ride a bike, row, Stairmaster. Walking on an incline is easily the best because if you can go in a neighborhood and you walk up and down a hill, that's amazing. Or if you walk up and down, obviously on a treadmill, that's even better. But those are the ways that, just call it aging people should optimize steady state cardio. You should not be doing high impact cardio. It's really bad.
A book that has had a major impact on your life.
There's so many of them. I think, wow. I mean, it's really, really difficult. I think right now, the one book that I just read that just tied everything together about like what's really going on in this level of reality is David Icke's newest book. It's called The Roadmap. And it's truly an incredible book on like esoteric, the nature of reality, the esoteric nature of reality, like what's really happening here. It goes into like all of the Epstein stuff and just everything that's going on in this level of reality right now. I mean, I've read so many business books and so many spiritual books that, I could say one of those, but I really like Ike's book, which came out in November of last year, because it truly hacks the matrix. Like you can read this book and come away at the end and you're like, okay, cool. I control my destiny with my thoughts. But I also now know what is going on with these elites that are, so-called governing and running the world. And it was like, for me, the first time in my 55 years of being on this planet that I was like, okay, now I got what's going on. I understand the matrix. So I
Right.
think I give that book credit. I mean, there's obviously so many books, Earl Nightingale's books, so many deep spiritual books that taught me that, my mind shapes and creates my reality. But I really just like Ike's book because he actually goes beyond that and tells you about that that's all true, but that like here's also what's happening. And so
Right.
I really love that book. So it's David Icke's The Roadmap.
Interesting. Thanks for the tip. And
You're what? You're welcome.
last one. Finish this sentence. The future of human longevity will be.
The future of human longevity will be dictated and dominated by people who become the proactive scientists of their own health.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. That is awesome. So, you just had a book come out. Let's tell the audience about your new book.
Yep. So it's again Metabolic Awakening with GLP-1 peptides. It's 12 days in the marketplace. It's already blowing up. It's like number one on Amazon in 20 different categories. It's definitely the best book ever written on explaining how to use GLP-1s in the context of health and longevity, and then also understanding like how not to, how to avoid all the bad side effects that a lot of people have experienced. Um, and that can be found on Amazon, wherever you can. The audio version of the book should be available any moment. It takes a long time for audio version books to usually publish, but it should be up there any moment. But right now, you can get a digital version. The Kindle is right now $2.99 through, I think, probably one more week. I think we'll do that. And then the hardbound, which is like the physician's desk reference, which has gloss pages, is available. And then the paperback is also there. And then the audio version will be there soon. But again, amazing book. Definitely my magnum opus of all the books that I've written. I think it's probably the one book that really, shows people the truth about stuff, what's going on, which they actually think the inversion.
That's awesome. And let's talk about your company, BioLongevity Labs. I'm a customer, so
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So BioLongevity Labs is very, very quickly becoming what we refer to as the Amazon for biohackers. We now have almost 102 different SKUs of different products. As you know, we have injectable peptides, we have bioregulators that are oral supplements. We also have small molecule oral supplements. Many of them are combinations of small molecules, bioregulators, and peptides together. They're definitely the bleeding edge, most synergistic, highest end stuff, tip of the sphere stuff in the entire marketplace. And we're only getting bigger and better, as you know, because our chemists are iterating and creating some of really some of the most revolutionary stuff in the marketplace. I mean, I definitely want to mention Clotho and FLGR242, which no one else in the world is actually even selling those products. And I do think that they're potentially billion-dollar products. Clotho being an incredible longevity agent, and then FLGR242 is theoretically the holy grail because it burns muscle and builds fat at the same time. I think almost every aging man and woman should be using a low dose of both of those products, as they get, to a point of like where their health is, their wealth. We never said that, but I like saying that our only real health in the world is our wealth. Excuse me, our wealth is our health, right? Because it doesn't matter how much money you have, if you have, you're unable to walk up a hill without getting winded or stairs, or even just feel good when you wake up in the morning. Who gives a shit how much money you have because you're suffering, right? So our real true health is our wealth. Our wealth is our health. And I think that that's the most important thing for people to understand as they age is that, without your health, you don't have anything.
you don't. You really don't.
No.
If people want to find you, follow you, work with you, especially get into your group, where can they go?
So jcampbell.com is like the big, architecting website with over 140 articles that are either on page one of Google or in the top 3 or 5 locations on Google on page one. You can go to, when you watch a podcast, you go to jcampbell.com/free-info, and you can get a downloadable PDF of all the books, not the newest one, which that'll probably be there in about 30 days, depending on when this podcast comes out. You can find me on social media when they don't delete me at jcampbell333. They just deleted my Instagram for the 4th time in the last like 6 months. So I think I'm done with Instagram, but I am available on X, not TikTok, because they deleted me 4 years ago there. TikTok, X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And eventually I'll be on Substack. But those are the most places to find me. And then, of course, if you go to biolongevitylabs.com, and I'm happy to create an affiliate code for you. If you don't already have one, you can use any affiliate code to get 15% off. But if they need one for now, it's just JAYC, which would be mine.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, Jay, this has been an awesome podcast with a lot of really great information, a fun conversation. Thank you for, spending your valuable time with me. I greatly appreciate it.
I really appreciate you. You asked amazing questions, and anytime I can serve you, let me know. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I sure hope you enjoyed that podcast. It was awesome. I could have probably spoke with him for hours. But here are a couple of takeaways that I got from our conversation. Number 1, peptides are the future of personalized health. One of the biggest insights from Jay Campbell is that peptides aren't just a trend, they represent a shift towards precision wellness. Instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, peptides allow us to target specific systems in the body. Now, whether that's fat loss, muscle growth, immune support, or even cognitive function, it's about working with your biology, not against it. Number 2, optimization, not just survival. Jay emphasized that we shouldn't settle for simply feeling okay as we age. His philosophy is rooted in optimization, helping people perform, think, and feel their absolute best at any age and at any stage of life. This aligns perfectly with my message about age is irrelevant, where if you have the right tools and the right mindset, you'll go far. Number 3, education is empowerment. A powerful theme throughout the entire conversation is Jay's commitment to educating people so they can take control of their own health. He's not about gatekeeping information. He's about demystifying complex topics like peptides and making them accessible, understandable, and actionable. And last but not least, number 4, longevity is a lifestyle, not a shortcut. Now, while peptides are powerful, Jay made it very clear that they're not magic bullets. True longevity comes from stacking really great habits in your nutrition, training, sleep, hormone balance, and mindset. Peptides can enhance the foundation, but they don't replace it. It's about building a sustainable, high-performance life. Now, if you'd like to reach out to Jay or get a hold of him, he is on Instagram. His main account is down right now, but you can also still find him on Instagram at jcampbell1971. He's also on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. His company, Biolongevity Labs, if you want to go shopping, you can use the code JAYC for 15% off. And if you'd like to find me, you can find me at helen@ageisirrelevant.com, or you can go to my website, www.ageisirrelevant.com. And don't forget, if you haven't read my book yet, Life Lessons from the Overhead Bin, it is on Amazon and it is $10. And I would love if you would buy it because you'll find it motivational and funny and just a great read. It's a very short read, 123 pages, so I know you'll really enjoy it. If there's anything I can do for you, please reach out to me. And as always, age truly is irrelevant. Take care. Bye-bye.